stop and then restart. So
Kerry and Marci here. If you can switch to speaker view, that would really help, so that you can see the three of us talking between each other. So shift from the big grid to speaker view. This one was a tough one to prepare for, Kerry and Marci. Number one, as I said in just before we started meeting here, you guys have probably got more experience of interviewing and being interviewed than anyone I've ever met. Kerry, I think you've written, is it a dozen books that you've written now? And hundreds of different articles and radio appearances and goodness knows what else. And Marci, I think that you yourself have just published a book as well. So there's this sort of profusion of work coming from the two of you around this theme, around transition, midlife transitions, career transitions, financial management in career transitions, and so on. And then we find ourselves in this moment where the entire world is in transition. So I couldn't think of two people better suited to come and talk to us about how to manage those transitions than the two of you. So, okay, sorry, where are we?
We're just saying, great to be here.
Yes, exactly, great to be here.
Fantastic. I know that we're supposed to sort of launch straight into the serious questions, but how did you guys meet? You're kind of on the web, when you search for the two of you's names, you come up together an awful lot. How did you meet and how did you decide to partner together?
Marci, I'll let you launch.
Sure. So I've been with Encore.org about 10 years, and I probably met Kerry at one of the Encore gatherings over the years. So Encore has been kind of a leader in the space of thinking of older people as assets and kind of as modern elders before the language was created by Chip. And Kerry and I both come to this work as journalists. So when I joined Encore, I had been a journalist for the prior 10 years, and I was aware of Kerry's work. And I think we met, though, at one of the Encore conferences, probably in California. And from my perspective, Kerry was just one of the people I always turned to look at what was going on, particularly with older workers and the future of work and women in work. And we were part of a collection of writers who were really thinking about the shifting demographics and older workers and the opportunity for both for people and for society to think differently about people after 50. And one thing, when you say this like mutual interview thing, I mean, I would say Kerry and I have interviewed each other for stories we've published like countless numbers of times. So we've probably quoted each other in articles more than you can ever imagine, but we also have had the opportunity to share the stage a lot and to be on media together and on stages together. So we kind of dub it the Kerry Marci show sometimes, because we do go on the road a lot together. Kerry, I'll let you enhance.
It's just so much fun because Marci has so much energy and such, a positive attitude that when I met her, it just was like lightning. I mean, the two of us just really connected. And I was in the process of, or I just finished a book, I think I was in the process of What's Next, which was where I profiled people who had done something for 20 or 30 years and made a completely different career change. And I had researched that book for about 3 years. And Mark Friedman, who founded Encore, was one of the people who along the way I met, who was a real leader for me in teaching me about this transition. And that brought us to Marci. And then the two of us just, Marci, there's so many Encore events we attended over those early years together. And this was really a new movement of taking a look at what could be accomplished after you've done something for 30 years and just say, oh, what the heck, there's something inside I've always wanted to do. Let's do it. And I think there was that energy between us that just connected.
I'll say one other thing, and this is so true, I think, for what the Modern Elder Academy is doing right now. I think one of the other ways that I really want to kind of point out something really unusual about Kerry is, so when I left journalism and I went to Encore, a big part of Encore's mission was to change the story of mid and later life and to change the way the media talked about that stage of life. And so Encore, even before I came to Encore, because I was kind of part of it from the other side, Encore had always had a vision that a big way you do that is to invite the media inside, to look at what you're doing and to be part of it. And what was interesting is Kerry was one of the earliest journalists who did that, who came inside both as a person who was documenting it, but also living through those transitions in your own life, right? And with you and your husband and your peers, like you were living it and documenting it. And Encore really fostered a community of journalists and media people who we think kind of created the Encore beat out in the world. And Kerry was always kind of, in our view, like the leader of that cadre of media people. And it really, I think it really helped all of us to kind of help shift the national conversation in ways that made it friendlier for this kind of, for the reality we're all facing.
So, and because you are both very sort of humble, when you say you were a journalist, you were working as a columnist for the New York Times, right? Doing kind of workplace questions. So you've been involved in thinking about the workplace and careers your entire life, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Kerry, you're one of my favorite humans to know right now because your last book was Never Too Old to Get Rich.
I know.
Unmuted. I think it is, who's this? Marlene, I think you are there you go, beautiful. Okay, so going back to you, Kerry.
Yes.
Tell us about, there we go. Tell us about your last book, and tell us also a little bit about what's next as well, because I think that's a lot of what we'll be talking about with the two of you is these transitions and how to manage them effectively.
Oh, thank you. Well, to start with the What's Next book, which was really pure magic for me. I spent 3.5 years going around the country, meeting people who had, made this kind of big transition. And I got to tell you, Jeff, I was so inspired by them. It's not that I wanted to do what they did, but I wanted to kind of be like them. I wanted to be brave and confident and be able to make these changes in my life, without looking back. And so that kind of got me thinking about it. And over the years, and several of the people in that book were entrepreneurs. They were people who started their own thing because of reaching this point in their lives, whether it was a crisis or, a health crisis of their own or a world event, but they really wanted to say, what's this all about? And so a lot of them were entrepreneurs. And so when I came to writing this most recent book, Never Too Old to Get Rich, I focused a lot on midlife entrepreneurship because there were so many people out there and their stories had to be told. And I also found this hunger for people who wanted to do this. And I'm like, hey, let's give them a roadmap on what people have done, how they've done it, and kind of guide people through this, but also give them that inspiration and confidence of seeing the narrative of what others have done. And so that was the impetus of this particular book, Never Too Old to Get Rich. And I will say it is a bit tongue-in-cheek because I want everyone to be comfortable financially, of course. And hopefully that's what your business will be. But, often it sounds corny, but it's so true. It's that inner richness. And every single entrepreneur I talked to said that it's feeling as if your life has meaning again. And that's a rich, a kind of richness you really can't put a price tag on.
Never too old to get purpose. There's a sort of a title. Yeah. So, okay. I don't want us to sort of dwell too heavily in COVID-19 and everything like that, but the two of you had a chance to sync up and think about what has this situation, how has that changed the dynamics, both in terms of the workplace with the unemployment rates as they are, and how that might impact our specific demographic, right? The modern elder. Have you talked about this? Have you thought about this? Obviously you have, but what are your thoughts?
Marci, I'll let you jump in first.
Sure, I'll start. I mean, first I'll say, I know modern elder has embrace the idea of, the gap year. And so many of us talk about taking a gap period or a pause. And so it is really interesting right now to see the world on collective pause, right? So many people are in pause. There are some of us who are working whose work has changed completely. And there are many of us who were in transition, and those transitions are now kind of probably, elongated for some time. So I think if you were in transition when this all happened, everything about the work landscape is uncertain right now. Looking at one of my MEA cohort fellow confidants, Debbie right here, like if you were a frontline worker, like Debbie, one of our physicians who's actually like out here unretired in a way that is very different than the way she thought she would be unretired, then, I think there was no time to even think. It's just, where am I needed? But for so many of us, there really is a collective sense of, back to the purpose question, right? Which is, you're really in a moment of thinking, not just what matters, but actually, how can I do something that matters in the new world order, which is very different than the way that might have looked for you a month ago. One thing about us all being in this age group is we all lived through a lot of things. And one thing we all lived through is 9/11, which is in many ways the kind of most analogous thing. Both Kerry and I wrote books in the wake of 9/11. And I think one thing, when you interview hundreds of people, and I was writing for the New York Times at that moment, is the 9/11 kind of spark affected everybody in terms of what they were doing in their career, how they had to rethink what they were doing, what suddenly mattered, but also what innovations does the world need right now? That whole question of what the world needs right now and how are we all poised to step into that, I think is the big burning question for all of us, which is, and the answer may be very different than what that felt like for us even 2 months ago.
I absolutely love what Marci just said there. It is exactly what you hear when people make these transitions. It often is spurred by something, as I mentioned earlier. And this period of time is, as we know, we've never seen anything quite like this. None of us knows what's happening, but we felt that way. 9/11 too, there was that really big fear about the world has changed forever. And so again, so these are things that we can take the positive lessons from and think about what Marci was saying. What are the innovations that are going to bubble up from this period in the aftermath? And, you start asking yourself these questions, why me? Why now? Why this? What can I do? What should I do? Where do my talents kind of fit in? And it's a great time to do that soul searching and really do that inner MRI about, hey, this gives me a little pause. Where do I want to see my next chapter go based on what I'm learning today?
So prior to this all happening, the demographic of 50 and above was actually the engine for starting new businesses in the US, correct?
Yeah.
In terms of your predictions, and predictions are worth exactly as much as the paper they're printed on, but in terms of your predictions and your thoughts right now, do you see that trend continuing? Do you see that trend being bucked? How do you see that trend line in terms of people in their 50s, 60s, and 70s being the engine for not only starting up businesses, but successfully starting up businesses?
If I can jump in quickly, Marci, I would just say, Jeff, here's the thing. This is it's going to continue to be a global movement of the entrepreneurs over, the age of 50 starting businesses and enterprises, nonprofits, those sorts of things, because we have that experience. We have that sort of sense of, not doing anything particularly rash. And we may still have financial reserves that will help us to launch this. But just when you look at the demographics of the world, this is a huge, bulk of the population, and we're living longer, healthier lives, presumably. And so it's going to have this opportunity. And moreover, I think this is not a positive, but it becomes a positive. In this time period with all the layoffs, there are going to be a lot of people in this demographic who are not going to get their jobs back. And that's a fact. I mean, ageism is alive and well in the workplace. And this is what happened the last time. When we went into a recession, it was a tough slog for someone in this age category to get rehired. And so that, and again, is an opportunity to think about maybe this is the time to do your own thing, because there is this frustration with rejection after rejection. I heard it over and over again from all of these people I interviewed that said, you know what, I'm sick of it. I'm just going to start my own thing.
I would say one other thing we're seeing a lot, and it's interesting to me, you know, one of the best ways to start something is to try it as a side hustle, or to try it kind of in a pro bono environment before, you know, to test the waters a little bit, or to try minimum viable product, right? And one thing that I think is so interesting in this moment is there's a huge, in my mind, barter economy, or kind of just offering it up, that I'm seeing happening all over. We all have seen people who are kind of tapping whatever they have and offering it out to the world. I mean, and for free. And people who are doing cooking classes online, various, every kind of fitness thing you can do. I've seen virtual home decorating consultancies. And in this kind of particular moment where there are a lot of needs and a lot of people needing comfort, it's interesting to see how many people are kind of, I mean, I just had an instance where, you know, I introduced two friends. Before I know it, one of them was offering to make a website for the other. The one offering to make the website is out of work. She just got sacked from a hotel industry job. And she didn't want to charge. She's like, no, I'm not going to charge. I think I'm going to learn something. And my other friend like decided she must pay her. But, you know, out of this whole thing, she's like, wow, I think this is something I really love doing. I always knew I had the ability to do it. And she's like, I think this is going to be my side hustle until I get launched again. So I think there is this way that people might accidentally, or sometimes through their own kind of generosity of spirit, be stumbling into things. So we, you know, there's a lot of people with a lot of time on their hands and a lot of knowledge to offer right now. And I think those will lead to some very interesting transitions.
And Marci, what's so great about that is that, you know, one of the steps I always tell someone who wants to make a career transition of any sort is, you know, do the job first. Can you volunteer? Can you, you know, moonlight? What is it you can do to try it out, just to see if it's something that's really what you want to do? And it could even be starting by taking a course or something. But what you just suggested is so perfect. It fits in exactly with that advice, because now is a time that we can share and we can learn. And hey, I want to try this as a side gig. And really, that's why women are, you know, sorry for the men in the room here, but women are fabulous entrepreneurs, because, and there's a whole section in my book just devoted to female entrepreneurs over the age of 50, because we are the fastest demographic of entrepreneurs. But because we're willing, we tend to like start things on the side and start small in baby steps, and we don't need to make that big splash. So if you can start something right now, or at least dream up your idea and start volunteering or giving of your time, I can't think of a better way to use this period.
So the barter economy is creating some fluidity. There's a generosity both in terms of time and the availability of resources. Your advice is use this time to trial stuff, to sort of explore things. And then, in terms of what we do, I have slightly different, well, not slightly different messages, but I've got three things that are on my mind from what I'm hearing you both say. The first, Marci, you talk a lot about looking inward to sort of find purpose. Can you counsel us, especially as we're all stuck in our homes, to think about how we might effectively look inward and find purpose at this time?
Well, I mean, I think one natural way to see is like, what is sustaining you in this time? I think we've now done this for 5 weeks. I forget what day we're on, like 59 or so. What are the things that are keeping you going right now, right? What are the things that are where are you seeing the light in all of this? And I think we all know now that when time feels so different than it always has, I think we're all finding that you can only do so many Zoom meetings, right? There's certain things we all know, you know, even if they're with the most wonderful community of people, certain things are energy draining and certain things are energy giving, and certain things are providing us with hope. And so I would say, where are you attracted right now? Where are the things that are the thing that gets you through your day? I saw so many people reacting to the few minutes we had with Teddy at the beginning of the call. And that was pretty meaningful, right? Just looking at the outpouring of response there. I just think listen to all of those. Like I've started this, it was always important to me to walk every day, but I do these morning walks and I take pictures of New York and I share them on Instagram. And it is like the thing that's getting me through there. I don't think I'm going to become a photographer, but it's definitely made me think a little bit about visual storytelling, for example. So I'm a storyteller. I do a lot of work on what we call narrative change. And I really feel like I want to be more in the visual aspects of that than I'm always about words. So I'm just saying, what are the signals around you that could be telling you something right now?
And Kerry, if I can layer on a couple of areas here, which is, so as you're looking inward, you're also, as an entrepreneur, having to look at what does the world need? And then the third leg of that is, what can I offer to fulfill that need, right? Where is my mastery, as we say here at the Academy? What are your thoughts about balancing across, you know, those inward purpose, what I love, what I'm drawn to, what the world actually needs so that I can be successful, and what I'm good at?
Yeah, you know, that those are the three legs of it. And what you need to do, and it's an exercise we've all heard over and over again, but take the time and sit down and review, like, what are the things that you really love to do? What are the things, as Marci said, where you're seeing the light? But write down what are your talents? What are the things you've done in your past career and your past work that you have absolutely loved, you know, that really has energized you? But it's important to really know our skill sets, and often we don't even recognize what we're great at. So you want to sit and, you know, ask people around you, you know, what is it, you know, what are some of the things you think I'm good at? That, you know, it sounds like, you know, you're asking for a compliment, but in a way you're asking people who will give you some honest feedback. And the truth of it, often the things we're really best at, we don't recognize because we simply take them for granted. So I really encourage people to reach out and do that journaling, and that look at what it is, and where are the things in your life that you see, you know, from your experience, that there might be a gap, that there might be a need for what you do. And also think of the people that inspire you and the kind of work they're doing, and try to learn their stories. How did they get there? How did they get started? Because we learn a lot by learning other people's stories, which is why in my books I tend to tell narratives of people's their launch stories. And Marci does that with the Encore people that she's worked with, and really highlighting these individuals that have done amazing things. And we need to tell each other these stories in order to see where do we fit in.
And in terms of what we do, as we're sitting there in our rooms, both of you have sort of written and thought extensively about, do we stay in what we know? So if I'm a writer, do I stay somehow in writing, or do we jump into something completely different? Or how might we think about moving into something completely different and be successful?
So I'm going to shift it to Marci, but I'm just going to say one thing on that before I let her take the stage. Is, you know, it's all about redeploying. It's about taking skills at the spine of what you've already been doing throughout your life, all those things you've added into your, you know, quiver. Use those things. You're not reinventing who you are. Use those to redeploy in a new direction. And of course, you're going to use a lot of that stuff that you've used before. I mean, I often tell a story about a guy who, when he retired from the military, he ran away with the circus. And I was like, what are you talking about? This has absolutely nothing to do with what you did. But in fact, what he did was he said, Kerry, you know, is the leadership skills I had, all these different things he had done. He became the company manager for the Big Apple Circus, moving a troupe of people up and down the East Coast. So again, it was a brilliant second act, but he wasn't totally reinventing himself. He used skills that he had learned in his military career. So I send it over to you, Marci.
I'll give a slightly different metaphor, but my advice is exactly the same, which is I was thinking a little about crossing a stream, stone by stone, and you got to kind of have a connection to the last stone each time. And so I've had 3 careers, but even in my time at Encore, I look at that as having a lot of shifts. And I went from law to journalism, But the way I did that is I started, I was a legal beat reporter. I started writing about the law, what I knew. And then I eventually shed the law stuff and became a journalist. And while a journalist, I had a bunch of slashes. I was a speaker and a coach and a writing instructor and a public speaker. I tried to do these things that were connected to the journalism. And when I joined Encore, that was another just one stone away. I was now in-house in a nonprofit kind of think tanky environment, doing so much of the same things that I had done as a journalist, but now around one set of issues and in a mission-focused organization. And after a couple of years, I joined the management team of Encore, and I had to learn nonprofit leadership. And all of that was just like another pivot, another stone. But then I went back and tapped all the stuff I used before. Like suddenly my lawyer skills were totally helpful, so I think there this idea of just, we carry a lot with us, right? So you can both do the stone hopping, but always draw on the layers of things we have in our earlier lives.
And then the secret ingredient is curiosity, right? So you've got all that, you've got that confidence from that spine of experience and your skills, but oh my gosh, I've got this curiosity about X or about Y, and I want to learn. I want to learn about that. I want to dig into that and move to that next stone, as Marci talked about. So it's tapping into this is sort of ingredient that we all have it in us, and that we need to tap into that and say, aha, okay, now what do I want to learn about now?
Marci, sorry, Kerry, I'm going to stay with you. Okay, so I've got my three legs of the stool balanced. I think I've got a good idea. I kind of love it. I'm curious about it. It lines up all my stones and everything's awesome. I wants it. Do I just jump, or do I need to do financial planning? How does money factor into all of this?
What a great question. So money, I gotta tell you, it really is important. What I have Kerry's fitness program. So especially the three pieces of my fitness program. Number one is you need to be financially fit. And by financial fitness, I mean, you need to sit down and do a budget. You need to figure out, how can I get lean and mean? What is it? Can I pay down debts if I've got some outstanding credit cards? Do I want to move somewhere different where the cost of living is more affordable? Do I want to just downsize my home? What is it I can do? Because if you're starting your own business, chances are you're not going to pay yourself for that first year or so, because you're, putting money back into your business to let it gain traction. You probably need to use your own capital to start up the business. Most businesses are self-funded. And if you're transitioning where you might be going to work for someone in making that career transition to a new field, chances are you're not going to make what you made previously. So accept that. You may definitely move it up, but I'm just saying initially you need to be financially fit. And that gives you possibilities. Then you're nimble about what it is you want to do. You're not restricted by, you need to make so much money. And this doesn't happen overnight. It takes time to really get that financial footing, but believe me, that will lead to your success. The second piece quickly is you need to be physically fit, because it's stressful and there is ageism. So if you can, people like women will often come up to me, mostly it is women, who say, should I dye my hair? Should I get Botox? And I'm like, what the heck? If that makes you happy, do that. But the most important thing is to get physically fit, walking, swimming, whatever it is you might do. Marci takes her walks through the city. I walk my dog. Whatever you do, you need to have a level of fitness, because that gives you that can-do spirit, that energy. People don't know what it is, but they look at you and they want you on their team, or they want to be your client. They want to do business with you. They want to be part of your life because you bring this positivity. And you don't even realize that, but it comes from being physically fit, and eat with an eye to nutrition as well. And the third piece is spiritual fitness. And that's really, sort of what we did at the beginning even of this conversation, is to center yourself, because it is stressful this time of life, starting new acts, new things, new chapters. So if you can find a place that's all yours, that you can, whether it's mindfulness, meditation, yoga, Tai Chi, find your place that's yours. And you can kind of go there to kind of calm down and quiet the mind, and then put those together. And in fact, it works for almost anything in your life, those three things.
Agreed. Yeah. what we touch on in our work down here. Marci, would you build on that?
Yeah, you know what? I want to say one thing. I mean, Kerry's a master of this, so I have nothing to add on that kind of financial model, and that Kerry's fitness plan is spot on. I think one thing that's really hitting me lately, and I think it was true before COVID, but I think it's even more true now, is this way about thinking about where we live and how we live. And I think anybody who's been to MEA, you know, one of the big common refrains, and I see it all over the community, is why can't we live more communally the way everybody felt at MEA? I mean, I think one big takeaway for me at MEA is we did not feel like we were necessarily at a resort. We felt like we were at this like amazing house where we all got to live communally. Like no one ever left the dishes unwashed. No one, like everybody was, right after the first day, you're like on board that this is how it works here. Okay, maybe not in my cohort, the confidants never did. Okay, so, but I think one thing that is so interesting to me is that we have been raised in the American way to think that independence and self-reliance is the key to everything. And I think one thing that COVID has taught us is isolation is not where you want to end up, right? We had a big game of musical chairs, and when the music stopped, we were all stuck quarantining with whoever we were with at the time. And some people had like grown children who came home and with families. Some people were with a partner. Some people who live alone happened to live alone. Some people who were a little kind of advanced planning, a week before they saw it coming, suddenly they're like, I'm making a quarantine here. And suddenly you have 5 people who choose to quarantine together. And guess what they had? A really fun group house with like hiking buddies, and everybody was safe together in a pod. And I think we saw something in that moment of like how that all played out that I think is going to really affect some of the ways we choose to live going forward. So I just, and what does that mean financially? I think it means that, wow, imagine if you could have an experience where you collectively handle expenses. And, you know, I think it opens up a lot of doors and maybe gives you some of the financial freedom that it's hard to get in other ways.
Again, touches back on this idea of people being more collaborative during this time period, more fluid, fungible with their resources.
Yeah, and I think it's something, we haven't talked about this yet, but a big theme of our work at Encore right now is about cross-generational connection and collaboration. And I think this is something that I'm learning quite a lot from younger people, just as I learn a lot about how to think about careers from younger people. And I know Nim Desward is on this call, and she's one of your, you know, your millennial whisperer. And I think, you know, Nim really influenced our group a lot in thinking about how millennials craft jobs right now, and things like, you know, you don't necessarily assume there's a job and apply for it. You like decide the job you want, and then you start courting the employer who might craft that job with you. I mean, just so many ways that I think those of us over 50 need to be learning from and partnering with young people. And I think young people are thinking really differently about home ownership and how they want to live and where they want to live and with whom they want to live. And I think there's a lot to learn there. And maybe there's also a lot to learn. I mean, I was talking to a consultant we're working with at Encore, Scott Shigeoka, who's a huge intergenerational maven. And he was like in the process of telling me how he's getting ready to move to a group house, and he's describing all the people he's going to live with. And he's like, and it's got age diversity. Don't worry. And he's 30. And he's like, we've got elders in the house. And it was, you know, this very interesting way to craft a way to live. But look at what that does for you financially if you've kind of thought about lowering your costs that way on housing and sharing collective costs.
I love that you brought in intergenerationality. I know that's one of your key themes, and it's also a really creative way to think about, look, if I can't make more money or I don't have a big bag of money, how might I bring my costs right down? Right?
And in a way that's not about depravity, it's depriving yourself. It's not about like, oh, I'm going to hunker down in a little studio apartment by myself. It's actually a much more expansive way of thinking about it.
It might be depraved. I mean, you know.
Maybe it is depraved, yeah.
But if we expand that to thinking about that concept, Marci, to careers and work and jobs, this, you know, I have a whole section in my book on these intergenerational businesses, these entrepreneurs, an older entrepreneur starting up with somebody who's in their 20s or 30s. And these are magical combinations that create nonprofits and businesses, for-profit businesses that have legs to go for 20 years, not just a 5-year project. This is something that can really continue, and they each bring such unique skills to starting something. And it's all about asking for help and joining resources like this. And so in fact, if you're starting something new and you can partner with somebody younger than you, fantastic. If they're not younger, the same age, fine. But the point is that you're marshaling your energies together and your finances together. So it's not as risky. And, and you can also say, hey, you're really good at this, but I'm better over here. Let's just divvy this up. And so you don't have to do it all yourself. You don't have to go it alone. So what Marci was saying, I think translates really nicely into this concept of communally starting businesses, working together to create new enterprises.
And to get someone else to do the stuff that you really don't like doing.
Exactly.
Of course, many younger people are also vulnerable to job loss and so on. So there's actually a nice match in terms of being able to find those people. Yeah. I know that both Nim and Solène, our interns, are looking for sort of elder pairings and partnerships. So maybe. And
our friends over at Circle, CIRKEL, are offering mentor matching, and their service is free right now during the COVID period. And it's, I can put it, it's a good resource to know. They host intergenerational online events all the time, but the matching service is an interesting way to be paired with someone older or younger to get to know them.
Okay, so we're rolling. We've got our intergenerational mentor. We're loving what we're doing. We've got it. It's all on. We've got our finances sorted. We're happy. Why do people at this stage of life fail? Given that so many do succeed, what are the rate limiting factors? What are the things in your research that you've both done that you've seen that people fail to do when they're starting up a business, when they're pivoting to a new career?
Well, I think, I'll jump in first, is that the biggest mistake is trying to go too fast. I mean, this is a process. It is not, it's a marathon in a way. It's not a sprint. It takes time. It's putting the pieces together. So, I always, the ones who succeed are the ones who have taken the time to, no rash moves, to add any necessary skills or certificates or whatever they might need to put the pieces in place before they launch. They've figured out the financial piece of it. You don't always have them, the perfect answer there, but they have some understanding of it. They've done their research. They've reached out and talked to people who are in those fields or are doing the kinds of jobs or the kind of work they want to do. And people love to talk about their jobs, so there's no reason to be nervous about that. You're not asking them to hire you. So you just want to do a little, suck up as much as you can information and do the research. These are the people who succeed. So they've built in this time of adding the skills, doing the research, doing the volunteer work ahead of time, the moonlighting ahead of time. And so that way, and starting on the side if possible, as a side gig, so you don't have everything, all your resources devoted to that. So these are some steps that I found lead to success. But the biggest mistake is trying to make it happen too fast. It's a recipe for disaster.
And you said that was gendered as well, right? Men tend to make that mistake more than women.
I have found that to be true. I don't have hard numbers on it, but let me tell you, because women are happy to start slowly and they don't need to hit it out of the ballpark. And I must say, this is why women can be fabulous investors as well, because we go the distance. We're patient. We do our homework. We wait. We don't need to have that hot stock tip. We don't need to have that hot business. We take our time and we are really comfortable collaborating and partnering up. And I think it's the way women, at least in our generation, at least in my cohort of people, we're socialized in many ways to be work in this fashion. So I find that women are quite successful at it. And in fact, women there are statistics, I don't have them in front of me, that globally show that women-owned businesses tend to have better track records.
Fantastic. Marci, closing thoughts on why people might fall down and fail?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of, I think Kerry nailed it, but I'll add two other kind of related thoughts, and I'm gonna embarrass him if he's on the line, but I think Chip exemplifies this so well, which is, I think there's a real need for humility, this curiosity, flexibility, learning, all of this, but there is a need for humility when you first enter a space. You're laughing, but I think, when Chip came into what was like the midlife field, from the hotel business, like I feel like I met him at that moment, like, and he called up a bunch of us who were in this space and asked if he could talk, and he asked to be introduced to people. And he had so much humility while he was in this learning phase. And I think it was so striking to anyone who met Chip to see that this person who was just so accomplished in anything he had done already was going at this with such a beginner's mind, such a curiosity and humility. And I think we work, we have a program at Encore called the Encore Fellowships, and we match people who are nearing retirement with these 1-year super high impact roles in nonprofit organizations and social impact roles. And the number one thing we screen for is that kind of humility. Like, we don't want someone to show up in a social impact organization with a superhero cape. We want a person who's going to say, wow, I have all this experience, but I also want to learn what you do and listen, and then kind of slowly figure out how they can have the most impact. And those are the people that are most successful in those fellowships.
Yeah, and you have to always remember to ask those people, as Chip did, is who else should I be talking to? Who else? Who's my next person? Because it's really having that learning quest to learn, and it's getting the ego out of the way, like Marci said. That is a huge stumbling block for people, especially if they've had big jobs. And then they step away from that because they've been used to being the person everyone went to for advice, the person who had all the answers. Well, you no longer have all those answers. And people often go into a grieving period about this sort of loss of identity. And there's a period in time where it can be kind of dicey because you have to be willing to do that work to get beyond that. But it can be an almost a mourning of your old identity and who you were before you can launch into this new direction. And it takes exactly what Marci just identified, is humility.
Yeah, we talk about the PIP complex, the previously important person, like you kind of figure that out. Yeah. It's a lot of PIPs in our world,
Yeah.
So patience, curiosity, and humility as we move in will hopefully kind of buffer us against some of the worst mistakes that we can make. I want to, well, first of all, from my part of the interview, thank you so much. You two are frigging amazing. We could have like a whole afternoon with you just sharing knowledge and wisdom. I want to open it up to the community to ask some questions, and I'd love to have Zoe and Leslie deal, if possible.
Happy to do that. I just have a request that those of you that are not on video, please turn your videos on so we can see you raise your hand when you have a question. Unless there's another way, Zoe, maybe they can raise their hand on chat. You're more techie than me.
If you don't have your video on and you don't want to turn it on, feel free to send in your question through chat. But otherwise, put your hand up and we will unmute you if you have a question for Kerry or Marci.
All right. Anybody have a question? I'm looking for hands. Just raise your hand. Diane, unmute. Okay, wait. I'm going to unmute you. There you go.
The name of the organization that Marci said matches people, it went by me so fast I didn't get a chance to write it down.
We added it to the chat. It's an Encore program. It's called Encore Fellowships, and Julia and Mim both just added the link.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thanks,
I see it now. I do see it.
Great. Anybody else? Okay. Wendy Garfield.
Hi. How long has Encore been around? And at this point, how large is it? I know that's a boring remedial. It's like a filmmaker asking what camera you use at a film screening.
No,
but
that's fine. We've been around for 20 years. Mark Friedman, our founder, is still the CEO. If you go to our website, encore.org, we just refreshed our About page, so you'll see a lot of our history there. We're pretty small. We only have about 26 employees, mostly in California, a few in New York, and a few distributed around the country.
Cool. And it started in California or in New York?
Started in California.
Yeah. Okay. That's what
It's always been national, though.
Yeah.
Our programs have never, been exclusively in California. We've always run national programs.
Well, it has been 2 years hearing about you. I'm so glad to finally see you, and I will get motivated and do it. Thank you.
Yay. Join our mailing list and social media and everything. It's a good way to keep up.
Okay.
And Wendy and everyone else, Mark Friedman, the founder and CEO of Encore.org, is speaking at our Resumian next Saturday, May 9th. So be sure to check your emails and register for that. Any other questions?
I love that.
Shameless plug. Anyone else?
As we're looking for another question, I actually do have another question. Are there other meta trends regarding aging, and not necessarily just as pertains to entrepreneurship and starting new businesses, but in terms of hiring or anything like that that we need to be conscious of, either positive or negative?
I could say something quickly that is a bit of a shameless plug, but given the aging population, and I do think people are going to want to continue to work in some fashion after what was traditionally a retirement age, because even if you've saved adequately for retirement, it's a safety net to have some kind of income coming in. You don't have to dip into your retirement accounts and so forth. And what I think is going to happen and coming out of in the aftermath of where we are now is we're going to see a lot more work from home opportunities, a lot more remote opportunities. And I have a new book that's just in the copy editing stages right now called Great Pajama Jobs. And so I think a lot of the, people in this 50 plus category are going to say, okay, you know what? I really don't want to go back to the office. I actually am enjoying working remotely. And where are some opportunities? What are some great employers who really encourage people to have this sort of autonomy? Because that is something I have found that most people in this age group, when you say, what do you love about your job? They love having, believing in the mission of the company or the nonprofit they work for. And they love having autonomy and the freedom to have a sense that they have some control over their time. So I think work from home is going to be a huge trend moving forward. The genie's out of the bottle on this one. And Marci and I have not, well, I don't know, Marci, you don't actually work from home that much, but I have for 15 years now. And I think it's the greatest.
I echo that completely. I was going to say two trends. One is, virtual is here to stay. And Kerry, I have worked primarily from home for the last 20 years. Yeah. So I travel a lot and I go into a WeWork occasionally, but I'm also, I've been working virtually. And I think we're past the point where people have now been convinced that a lot can work virtually. And I think it's going to be hard to now go back and convince people otherwise. And I think that has a lot of benefits to older people and also to the disability community and to anybody who's ever had accessibility issues. I mean, so long, just imagine how long people have been told we can't craft the job that way. And now we're realizing that so much can be done this way. So I think people are going to have a whole lot more opportunity to create flexible employment situations. The other thing that I know we've seen a lot of ageism, but I think, how at every moment, the same and its opposite is also true. I think we've also seen a lot of elder reverence right now. And I'm a media person. I've been following the media narratives. And a big one out there is we got to talk to older people. They've survived shit and they can tell us how to do it, how to be resilient, how to get through things. How many interviews have you read with, the last living survivors of the 1918 flu pandemic? I posted on the MEA page, I don't know if you saw it, and now I'm addicted to this sugar calling podcast from the New York Times, where the author Cheryl Strayed is interviewing authors over the age of 60 to get their wisdom in this moment. It is brilliant. So I do think the idea of elder wisdom is really going to be trending. People are, every weekend, and we're all doing a lot more phone calling, and I find that I'm calling like younger people and older people. I'm calling younger people because I want to know, like, what's life like for people at really different life stages. But I'm talking to a lot of people over 80 every weekend because they're giving me a whole different perspective of what it means to be in this moment. And so I think this is something that I hope is a positive in the aging conversation.
And just to sort of build on that as well, Marci, you should also like be plumbing your own communities, right? If you belong to something like the MEA community, how do you reach out to people in this network to help you, whether it's to Kerry's point, to sort of learn and build and think and take your time in terms of your possible pivot, but also maybe to find those partnerships and potential players to play with.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Other questions? Other thoughts?
Nancy, how about Nancy? I see your hand waving. Wait, hold on, I'm unmuting you.
Yeah, thanks. I have a question for Marci. I am wondering if you could tell us more about that intergen housing that your 30-year-old Encore intern is embarking on.
Sure. So that is a totally self-organized situation. That's a bunch of people who rented a house together, really just a bunch of kind of friends who wanted to live together in an intergenerational way. There are some organized entities that are doing this. Nesterly is an example of a company that's doing matching, and they match graduate students with older people who have a spare room in their house. And it's a real win-win, right? It's an affordable housing solution. It's an intergenerational friendship and connection solution. So there's Silver Nest, which is doing roommates, but we've done some pilots with them to try to work on intergenerational opportunities. We were trying to get them to get, actually it was with Airbnb hosts also, to get Airbnb hosts to make rooms available for younger people doing service years or Teach for America positions. So there's, I would say, the intergenerational co-housing space, big space to watch. I think it's still early stage, but there's a lot of innovation happening. And then there's just a lot of self-organized ways that people are doing it. So I think it's something we're extremely interested in. We're launching a new fellowship for innovators in the intergenerational space, and I anticipate that we're going to get some in the housing entrepreneurship area, because I think that we're all very excited about that area. Mm-hmm. And we need scalable solutions that we could all tap into, really.
Absolutely, yeah. Great, thank you so much.
Okay, any more for any more? I think we're just about done, right, Zoe? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
We've got 1 minute left. Anybody? I'm looking for hands.
Well, I was actually going to ping it over to Christine to just say hello.
Yes.
Anything from you, Christine? Just saying hello.
Hello, everyone. No, I don't have a question. I'm reeling myself in, but it's been so lovely to see everyone. I've had so much fun over in the chat, and please do reach out and say hello to me. I am on my computer all day long in my pajamas with a dog on my lap, so I am certainly available in ways that I am normally not when we're in operation, and happy to connect. So I hope everyone's doing well. Miss everybody. Marci, thank you so much. Kerry, thank you so much. Everyone, really lovely time together today.
Thank you, guys. I really enjoyed it, and thank you for your time. It's a beautiful gift.
It's wonderful.
We do this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Come off mute, everybody. Just say thank you and goodbye as we close.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
So much fun to be back with the MEA family.
You guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Simon,
Nice to put
Teresa.
in.
Wow. Hi, Frederick.
Hey, nice seeing you.
Aw. Michelle from Australia. Joel Rubin. Woo-hoo.
Woo, Doug. Oh, Kate. Yay.
Oh, man.
Christine, can I see Speck?
He just ran out. He built him a ramp into my office so he can come in and out on his
I've
own.
seen him on the ramp on Instagram.
Oh, Kate, who's that?
That's Arthur and Nim, my babes.
You have a dog named Nim?
I miss seeing them, Kate.
Hi, sweetie. Good to see you guys all.
Oh my God.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Bye.
Bye. It's going to end here in a second. So until next week. Mwah. Bye.